Hello everybody, today we'll be talking about the ratification of the United States Constitution. Basically we'll be talking about how all the laws and systems that they wrote down in Philadelphia in 1787 became the new set of laws that governed the United States in 1789. Here are the goals for this video. Take a minute to read these 6 questions and make sure that by the end of the video you have some kind of answer for all of them. So let's start off by talking about ratification and what ratification means. So the Constitution was all written up and ready to go in 1787. But before it could become the system for the U.S. government, it had to be accepted by the states, aka ratified. To be ratified, the Constitution needed to be accepted by all of the individual states. And how this worked was that each state would vote to elect a certain group of people who would get together and debate about whether the Constitution was a good idea or a bad idea. And after they had debated, they would take a vote. And if they voted that the Constitution was a good idea, then they would agree to join into this new U.S. government. So the delegates at the Constitutional Convention decided that if 9 out of the 13 states voted to ratify the Constitution, then it would go into effect. So this meant that even if 4 states decided not to ratify, the Constitution would still become the new system of U.S. government. This system of ratification led to a huge debate throughout the United States, in which people argued for and against adopting the Constitution as a new system. The people who supported ratification were called Federalists. The people who opposed it were known as Anti-Federalists. Take a minute and look at the map here, and you'll see that in terms of area, the people who supported the Constitution and the people who opposed the Constitution were more or less split evenly. The red areas you see here were opposed to the Constitution, and the purple areas were the areas that were more likely to desire the Constitution. You'll notice that the purple areas tend to be closer to the coast and to occupy more of the urbanized areas, such as New York and Philadelphia and Boston. So anyway. So the Federalists, who were these guys? Well, these were the guys that supported ratification. And they were called Federalists because they wanted to change America's government from a confederal system to a federal system. And so in a confederated system or a confederation, all of the individual states would keep most of their power, and the central government would be really weak. This was the system that the United States already had under the Articles of Confederation. Opposed to this, there was the federal system. In a federal system, individual states would give up a lot of their power, and this would make the central government really strong. Basically, there'd be one government in the middle that could tell all of the other states what it had to do. This was the system that the Federalists wanted. They wanted a federal system, so they were called Federalists. Makes sense. The people who supported federalism tended to be wealthier, more educated, and less rural than the average American. These guys were the well-to-do people who lived in coastal cities and stuff like that. The Federalists believed that a stronger central government would help America to become stronger, richer, and more stable. Famously, to support the Federalist cause, 3 leading politicians, James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton, got together to write a series of articles called the Federalist Papers, which defends the Constitution and argues for a strong central government. we're going to look at a couple of the papers in class tomorrow, probably. So, opposed to the Federalists, we have the Anti-Federalists. They're called the Anti-Federalists because they're against the Federalists. So these guys oppose ratification. They think that the Constitution is a bad idea. Like I already said, they're called Anti-Federalists because they think that a confederation is better than a federal system. They're opposed to the Federalists and their ideas. These guys tended to be poorer, more rural, and less wealthy than the Federalists. They lived away from the coast, in the countryside. Fewer of them went to college. These guys think that the Constitution is a bad idea. Why do they think that? Well, they believe that the Constitution gives too much power to the central government, and that this would result in a new tyranny, much like the old one that they suffered under England. They believe that just as the King of England was able to tax the colonists and oppress them without listening to what the people wanted, they think that this new powerful central government is going to be able to do the exact same thing. They argue that for a government to work, it has to offer more protection of the individual and their human rights. Rights like the ones that Thomas Jefferson declares in the Declaration of Independence to be inalienable: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Two guys that become champions of the Anti-Federalist cause are Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry. There's a picture up there of Patrick Henry, who famously opposed the Constitution, saying, "Your president may easily become a king. Your Senate is so imperfectly constructed that your dearest rights may be sacrificed by what may be a small minority. Where are your checks in the government?" And so he became a spokesperson for lots of people who were skeptical of a new, powerful government. But in spite of anti-federalist opposition, the Constitution eventually becomes ratified. It passes. Part of the reason that it becomes ratified is the Federalists are willing to compromise on a couple of issues. The most important issue that they're willing to compromise on is the protection of individual rights. They promise that if the Constitution is ratified, that they will move immediately to pass a Bill of Rights, which will change the Constitution to make sure that the central government cannot impede upon the rights of individuals or of states. And this compromise wins over many anti-federalists. A lot of small states jump on board really quick, except for Rhode Island, who was against the whole idea from the very beginning. But the small states get on board because there were a lot of deals made during the Constitutional Convention that gave the small states more power than they thought they were originally going to have. Most importantly, this is in the Senate, where tiny little Delaware, which only has about 60,000 people, gets just as many votes as enormous Virginia, which has almost 750,000 people. So in the Senate, Delaware and Virginia are equal. Obviously, Delaware is pretty happy with this deal. So they jump on board, so do a lot of other smaller states. A few larger states, though, aren't really happy with this setup. Specifically, Virginia, New York, and North Carolina continue to oppose ratification of the Constitution for quite a while. For 2 years, they refuse to sign on. But eventually, as all these smaller states sign on, these larger states realize that no state, however large, however powerful, can afford to be left out of this new system of government. And so eventually, one by one, they sign on. This means that by 1789, the Constitution was ratified and the new government was ready to begin working. And it had a lot of work to do. We'll talk about this, all of the new things that the new government of the United States does, next week, probably. You can see over on the right a list of states in the order that they decided to ratify the Constitution. Here are your video goals once again. This video has answered all of these questions. Now the question is, can you answer them? Read through these, make sure you know the answers to them. It might be important tomorrow.